You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, sports fans. Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am Jacob Valk, and I have to start with the latest proposal to get a 2020 MLB season off the ground, but I really don't want to. Like, it doesn't matter at this point. We know that the league is gonna reject this proposal. 89 games and full prorated salaries. Okay, great. I think that's great. Good job by Tony Clark and the MLBPA for getting a proposal done. I didn't know if they'd be able to, so good job. And this should be accepted. There's no question about that. But it's not going to be. That's the thing. We know it's not going to be accepted. We know that the owners are being greedy. They don't want the players to get 100% of their prorated salaries. And that's really the ultimate obstacle here. It's not anything else. It's not players being mic'd up. It's not, expanded playoffs or the changes that they're going to make to the game. It's the prorated salaries. It's the fact that Major League Baseball does not want to pay these players 100% of their prorated salaries. All right, that's it. I think they should. I understand that the owners are losing money. I get it. But I think that's the only fair way to do this. 100% of their prorated salaries. I mean, here's the one thing I'll say. The last proposal said that players would only receive 75% of their prorated salaries. So maybe that extra 25% could be deferred. I don't know. But it's getting more and more likely that we don't get baseball this year. And Rob Manfred will cement himself as one of the worst commissioners in baseball history, if he allows that. I've said this a million times. Major League Baseball can't survive this. They can't even survive a 50-game season. I don't understand what Manfred's saying here. A 50-game season is going to be good for the league? No, that's utter nonsense. I mean, that's what he's telling you. He thinks that a 50-game season is better than no season. Look, I understand that, but it's still a joke. And this idea that the owners don't want to play too far into October, and the owners saying that's because they're afraid of a secondary wave of the coronavirus. That's not why they don't want games into October. They don't want to go up against football. I mean, it's bad enough that the postseason already goes up against football, but to have regular season games go up against football for 2 months, that's a tough ask. playoffs, you can sort of kind of get away with it because those games are played on weeknights. And unless you have a huge interest in the teams playing on Thursday and Monday night, most likely you're going to watch the MLB playoffs. But the owners don't give a damn about the players and a secondary wave. They just want to try to maximize their profits for this year. That's all it is. I mean, just come out and say it. And I'd respect you a whole hell of a lot more. You know, I've really run out of things to say about this. It's a joke. Both sides should be ashamed of themselves. This is on the players as well as the owners. They're both being penny smart, pound foolish. One side needs to suck it up and say, okay, fine. We're okay with not getting what we want here. For the betterment of the fans. That's what this boils down to. The fans are the real losers here. And I've said this 100 times. Major League Baseball can't survive this. I don't know if they'll ever be able to get these fans back. How are they going to entice fans to come back? You've already told them that you don't care about them. You just care about their money. I mean, there's no one that loves baseball more than me. I'll tell you, it's going to be really tough to get back into the Yankees in 2021. As much as I'm looking forward to seeing Garrett Cole in his first start in pinstripes, seeing Judge again, seeing Sanchez again, Torres, Stanton, you name it. It's going to be really tough to get back into it. Both sides are idiots. That's what you need to realize. And there's some sense of poetic justice to the MLB draft being tonight. New players becoming members of the MLBPA. They don't get to shake hands with the commissioner because it's all being done remotely. Rob Manfred is going to come out tonight on MLB Network and ESPN and pretend that everything's normal. Oh, God. He's so dumb. I mean, the best thing he could do would be to come out tonight and say, we have a deal in place. Instead, he's digging in his boots. He's so dumb. I mean, I'll tell you, I'm not even going to watch the MLB draft tonight. I don't want to look at Manfred. I don't get into the MLB draft anyway. I don't follow high school baseball or college baseball. I follow minor league baseball, but that's just for the top prospects. I mean, it's amazing. Major League Baseball is having its draft tonight. The only live sporting event going on. And no one's going to watch it. I understand that no one cares about the MLB draft anyway. But don't you get the sense that there would be more people watching it just for the sake of watching it if we had a season in the offing? I don't care what anyone says. To me, it's more likely than not that we're not going to get baseball this year. And with the likelihood of no baseball, don't you think I'd want to watch the MLB draft just to see something? No. I'm not going to watch it. I don't want to look at Manfred. I'm disgusted with the whole thing. I don't want to look at Tony Clark either. Both sides are at fault here. That's the thing. Shame on both of them. The real losers are the fans. That's what you need to realize. You're screwing over the fans, and you're going to have a real tough time getting them back. In fact, I don't know if you'll ever be able to get them back. Moving on now to a really sad death to me in the world of football. And this death really flew under the radar. The only reason I saw it was because I happened to be on Twitter the same time that Rich Cimini of ESPN tweeted about it. He's the Jets beat writer. And that is the death of Paul Rochester. A very, very underrated part of the Jets' Super Bowl III team. He started out with the Dallas Texans. If you know your football history, you'll know that that team later became the Kansas City Chiefs. And Rochester didn't need much time to show what he could do. In his second season, he made his only AFL All-Star team. That was 1961. In 1962, the Texans were AFL champions after they beat the Oilers 20-17 in one of the best games in AFL history. Patrick Gallivan and I talked about it a little bit. The game went into double overtime, a tale of two halves. Texans come out to a 17-0 lead in the first half. The Oilers score 17 unanswered points to tie the game at 17. It goes into double overtime, and Tommy Brooker kicks a 25-yard field goal to win the game for the Texans. In 1963, the Texans would move to Kansas City. But Rochester didn't spend a lot of time in Kansas City. He only played 9 games there. Then he got cut and latched on with the Jets. Ironically enough, his first game as a Jet was against his old team, the Chiefs, and the Jets won 17-0. In 1964, Rochester spent his first full year with the Jets, and he fit in perfectly as a starting left defensive tackle playing next to Jerry Philbin in his rookie year. And that tandem of Philbin and Rochester would be one of the key reasons why the Jets would win Super Bowl III. In 68, obviously the Jets would win Super Bowl III, but it's important to remember how they got there. They won the AFL championship game by beating the Raiders 27-23. In that game, Rochester had a sack. He did start. I've said this before. I think I said it to Gallivan. The defensive line of the Jets was insane. Oh no, Gallivan, we spoke about the defense. But the defensive line was a huge part of that, obviously, with Philbin, Rochester, John Elliott, who I forgot about when I was talking to Gallivan. But I shouldn't have, because Elliott was incredibly underrated. and Verlin Biggs, who made a Pro Bowl that year. In fact, every member of the Jets defensive line in 1968 made a Pro Bowl except for Rochester. Rochester didn't get on the stat sheet for Super Bowl III, but he was doing things to impact Unitas and Morrill. Carl McAdams also got involved. The moral of the story is Paul Rochester was an extremely underrated part of the 68 Jets. In 1969, Rochester was nearing the end of the line. He played in 13 games, but he only started 4 of them as he was rotating with Steve Thompson. All due respect to Steve Thompson, but he wasn't as good as Rochester. His last game with the Jets was against the Chiefs in the divisional round of the AFL playoffs. An absolutely terrible game for the Jets. Namath was abysmal, 14 for 40 for only 164 yards, no touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. The Jets would end up losing 13-6 because of Gloucester freaking Richardson catching a pass from Len Dawson. Have you ever heard of Gloucester Richardson before? Yeah, I didn't think so. Rochester wouldn't travel with the Jets into the NFL. He would retire after the 69th season. He's one of only 20 players who played throughout the AFL's 10 years of existence. An incredibly underrated player. May he rest in peace. Alright, no trifecta today, but I will recap the Dolphins draft class and give you another Mount Rushmore. So, here we go. Time to talk about the Dolphins 2020 NFL draft class. The Dolphins did the right thing in drafting Tua. He had to be the pick. Not Justin Herbert, not Jordan Love. It had to be Tua. This is the guy who the Dolphins threw away last season for. I understand that he got hurt. And the injury is scary. I get that. That was a scary hip injury. I wasn't watching the game live, but I remember when they cut in to show it, and it's like, ooh, man, that's tough. But this guy is such a... I don't know if generational talent is the wrong word or not. He has that type of ability. When you look at what you want a quarterback to be, it's a lot like Tua. This is a guy who came in immediately under the 8 ball, replacing Jalen Hurts in the CFP title game and leading Alabama to a come-from-behind victory. No one had ever heard of this guy. He has great accuracy, great arm strength, mobile in the pocket. Reminds me a lot of Steve Young. I mean, maybe it's because they're both lefties, but boy, I'll tell you, I see a lot of Steve Young in Tua. It kills me to say it, but I think the Dolphins have their franchise quarterback for the next 15 years. The Dolphins followed that up, though, with some really stupid picks. I did not like the Austin Jackson pick. I remember when Goodell announced it, he was saying to the Dolphins fans who were behind him on that monitor, "Come on, get excited, you got some protection for Tua." It was really funny. I thought Goodell actually handled it really well. He did a good job all throughout this. But I wasn't a big Austin Jackson fan. I mean, he's a jack of all trades, master of none. Really durable player. I get that, and he's a smart player, but I just don't see a lot in him. You know, he's a high floor, low ceiling guy. I just don't think I see enough there to warrant a first round selection. I had him as the 39th best prospect in this draft. To take him at 18 was a huge, huge, huge reach. I understand protecting your franchise quarterback, but fill your other holes first. Xavier McKinney would have made perfect sense there. Noah Igbenogany was a guy who early on I thought could be a sleeper prospect. He was getting some day 3 buzz as a guy who could move up into day 2, and yeah, I get it. Jack of all trades, master of none, except for his ball skills. He just does not know how to catch the football. He started 26 games at corner. Didn't intercept a single pass. While I don't care if my corners are good tacklers, I like them to be able to intercept the ball. That's why I had Igbenogany as a solid 3rd rounder. But the Dolphins majorly reached for him. I like the player, so I can't kill it too much. But there's something to be said about if you really like this guy, I mean, just trade down to get him. I know that the Dolphins traded down a few spots to get him. I get that, but they still took him at the end of the 1st round. There were better corners available than Noah Igbenogany. Robert Hunt was a guy who steadily climbed up a lot of people's boards throughout the draft process. Another jack of all trades, master of none. The thing that I really like about him is his versatility. He was a 4-year starter at Louisiana Lafayette, and in those 4 seasons, he started 21 games at right tackle, 22 games at left guard, and 2 games at left tackle. Super athletic, smart player, really athletic, good blocker, jumped off the tape at Lafayette. The biggest reason why I was kind of low on him was because I didn't know what position he'd play. You know, this is a guy who just bounced around so much on that O-line. It was hard for me to circle a position for him. A lot of people were saying guard, a lot of people were saying tackle. That just knocked him down my board. I like my offensive linemen to have a set position. Having said that, though, if Hunt can just focus on one position and do that for the next 10 to 15 years, he's going to be a really good player in this league. As much as I wasn't crazy about the reaches that the Dolphins made, I like the players they took, and Tua should too. In my opinion, Raekwon Davis was the 62nd best player in this draft. ESPN had him at 105. I don't know what on earth they were smoking. I see a player here who just does everything right. He does nothing fantastic. I get that. I repeat myself a lot when I do these. Jack of all trades, master of none, and the thing is, but That's really the best way to describe some of these guys, man. I'm telling you. The Dolphins took him at 56, so, hey, give me credit. I was closer to where he actually went than ESPN. Davis is the prototypical jack of all trades, and I think he's gonna be a staple on the Dolphins' defensive line for years to come. Brandon Jones was a fourth rounder to me. I mean, he's going to be a solid, strong safety in this league. You know how I feel about strong safeties. He has a bad frame, but he's a really good tackler. Team captain at Texas, which I like, but I don't like his intelligence. Really bad cover skills, really bad ball skills. I have to ding him a little bit for just profiling as a good, strong safety. Not a great strong safety, just a good strong safety. I had a fourth round grade on him. I don't like that the Dolphins reached for him. They did need a safety, though, so I'll give them, I don't want to say a pass, but I understand why they made this pick. One thing you have to say about the Dolphins is they understand how important it is to protect their young quarterback. They took another offensive lineman in Solomon Kindley, who's really a jack of all trades, master of none. I know, really original, but it's true. That's what I see in him. I see a guy who is going to be an average starter in this league, could be a long-term swing player for the Dolphins. I really like Kindley. I think Kindley is going to produce. He just has such a low ceiling. I mean, Austin Jackson's ceiling is higher, but they're similar in that respect. I had an early fifth round grade on Kindley. I don't like that he was taken early in the fourth round. One thing I'll say is, I like the players the Dolphins took. I really, really do. Especially Jason Strowbridge, a guy who I had as the 60th best player in this draft. I don't know how he slipped to 154th overall. I understand he has a bad frame. He needs to put on muscle. I get that. But I think he's going to. I really, really do. This is a guy who has the motor to do it. Very versatile player. Good pass rusher. Good against the run. Jumped off the tape at UNC. There are some people who have durability concerns about him, and I get it. His frame does yield him to that, but man, I'll tell you, I think Strowbridge is going to be a great player in this league. That was one of the best picks of the whole draft, to take him where the Dolphins did. And then they followed it up by taking another falling player. Curtis Weaver was a guy who I had a third round grade on. I don't know how he fell to the middle of the fifth round. Jack of all trades, master of some. His production at Boise State was off the charts. He actually is the Mountain West Conference's all-time sacks leader, passing Jan Jorgensen and Jerry Hughes. He's a durable player, no injury concerns whatsoever. I don't know how he slipped to the fifth round. I really don't. This is a guy with all the talent in the world. And that Dolphins defensive line of Weaver, Strowbridge, and Christian Wilkins And Raekwon Davis, too? I mean, my God. Brian Flores had to be doing backflips over this. I weep for Sam Darnold. I really do. In the 6th round, the Dolphins took a long snapper in Blake Ferguson. I'm sure he's a good long snapper. Went to LSU, playing with Joe Burrow. I'm sure some of that rubbed off on him. I don't mind the pick. Malcolm Perry is a really interesting player. This is a guy with fantastic leadership skills. He did more than go to Navy. He was a team captain at Navy. That means a lot to me. That's a very highly sought after position. He can play running back. He can play wide receiver. A really gadgety type player. It'll be interesting to see what Chan Gailey can do with him. I liked watching him at Navy. I think Perry will be a solid player. All in all, I really like the players that the Dolphins took. They reached for some of them. I get that. But there's really no player in this draft class who I think is going to bust. I mean, the most likely one may be Tua, and that's just based on his injury history. Maybe Solomon Kindley, because I don't know how high of a ceiling he has. But the Dolphins hit a home run in a draft that they absolutely had to. You have to tip your cap to them. They did a great job. I'm giving them a B+. I can't give them an A because they reached for a lot of their players, but I really like the players that they took. A B+ is more than fair. Alright, it's time for another Mount Rushmore. We're on the Carolina Hurricanes now, a team that has only won one Stanley Cup in 2006, Cam Ward's rookie season. He comes in and immediately shows that he belongs after a bad regular season. He finishes the 06 playoffs with the most wins in the whole playoffs, most minutes played by a goalie. It's an absolute travesty that after that, he only played in one more playoffs. The 09 playoffs. Where the Hurricanes got swept by the Penguins in the conference finals en route to them winning the Stanley Cup. I do remember the 06 Stanley Cup Finals, though, because that was the first time that I was left home alone. I was 9 years old. First time. And I watched the Cup Finals. Pretty good way to spend a night. Oh, man. Gotta love it. The correct Mount Rushmore is Ron Francis, Eric Stahl, Cam Ward, and Rod Brindamore. Ron Francis obviously started his career with the Hartford Whalers, went to the Penguins in a blockbuster trade that helped them win their back-to-back Stanley Cups in the early 90s. If you want to listen to a good interview, the Greg Enright interview, especially the end of it, that was really funny. I could tell he had a good time. After the Penguins, Francis went back to the Hurricanes franchise. Didn't win a Stanley Cup with them, but was still putting up great seasons. He's the Hurricanes franchise's all-time leader in points. Won a Lady Byng trophy in 01-02 for the Hurricanes. Won 3 total. Great defensive forward. Great two-way player. Ron Francis is the easy number 1. Eric Staal was the best player on the Stanley Cup winning Hurricanes team. He put up 100 points in his age 21 season. And to put that into perspective, his rookie season, 03-04, realize 04-05 was the lockout year. In 03-04, he only put up 31 points. No player benefited from the lockout more than Eric Staal. That was his only 100-point season, but Staal would continue to produce for the Hurricanes. I remember when he got traded to the Rangers. I'm glad he didn't do much for him. And then he went to the Wild and did a lot for them. So, I like Eric Staal. He screwed over the Rangers a little bit. Cam Ward, I already told you how great he was in the 05-06 playoffs. Finished with over 300 wins for the Hurricanes. Won the Conn Smythe Trophy that year. I mean, he, all throughout his Hurricanes career, was great. Except in 13-14, when he got hurt. But you're allowed one bad year. 12-13, he got hurt also, but he was okay that year. Really sad that the Hurricanes didn't keep him around for his whole career. They decided to move on with Peter Mrazek and Curtis McElhinney. I mean, it's worked out. Mrazek looks like the long-term answer for the Hurricanes, but it would have been nice if Ward could have played his whole career with the Hurricanes, and McElhinney obviously went to the Lightning. Rod Brind'Amour was a hugely important veteran presence on that young Hurricanes team. He put up 70 points in the Stanley Cup year. Won 2 Selke trophies for the Hurricanes. Great defensive forward. Basically a rich man's Michael Pekka, I think is the best way to describe Rod Brind'Amour. And I liked Michael Pekka. Tomorrow, you're going to get the latest and greatest in sports, whether that's the trifecta or not. I'm probably not going to talk about the MLB draft. Like I said, I really don't follow it. I know the big names, Spencer Torkelson and Austin Martin. I think they're projected to go 1-2. I really don't know. Like I said, I don't follow it very closely. Until tomorrow, I am Jacob Valk saying that the cops picked me up on a street at 3 a.m. and fined me $500 for being drunk and $100 for being with the Mets.